welcome to this episode of Inflight. I'm your host, Sol Vasquez. Boy, it has been a while since we have sat down and had an Inflight episode. I am so sorry for that, but as you guys know, we had a whole entire simulator release, so things of course were very busy around that time, and getting Inflight episodes wasn't exactly the priority, so thank you guys so much for sticking with us during this time of silence. We have a great episode ahead of us today, and we have a great lineup of guests coming this way. So Inflight is coming back, and we're going to be releasing regularly as soon as we possibly can, and we have some great guests coming on, as I said. We're taking it back to X-Plane for this episode, but the guests that we have in the future are MSFS focused, so if you are interested in that, please stay tuned because we have great guests coming on the way. Our guests today are Joe and Matheson, who are the two primary people behind SimVRLabs. Now you may be asking yourself, what is SimVRLabs? Well, SimVRLabs is a group of people who help to bring VR to X-Plane. They're VR lovers. They have a group, a club actually, on our forum, the Threshold forum, and they help out people in bringing VR to their aircraft, and also they help other aircraft developers bring VR to their aircraft right out of the box. They're a really, really great group. So we spent this entire episode talking to them about VR in X-Plane and also MSFS, talking about the advantages it has, the disadvantages it has, and how they all got started in doing this for X-Plane developers and X-Plane users. So please help me welcome Joe and Matheson from SimVRLabs. Joe and Matheson, thank you so much for joining us today. Welcome to the show. How are you doing today?
Doing well. Thanks for having me.
I'm great. Thanks for inviting us.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you guys for reaching out to us and making your presence known amongst the two in-flight hosts. So tell us a little bit about yourselves, because as I just alluded to, I didn't know about SimVRLabs until you reached out to us, and I'm sure that sentiment is also shared amongst some of our listeners. So tell us about what you guys do, how you guys got into it, and maybe after that, if you guys want to just get into a little bit about yourselves as well, and the type of people you are.
Sure. I'll go. I'm Joe, and I started SimVRLabs back in what would have been April 2018, which is when X-Plane 11.20 was in beta, and it was the beginning of VR in X-Plane. And it just so happened that the Christmas before that, I got a Oculus Rift CV1, and VR totally changed my world, right, with flight sims. At the time, DCS was the only way I had tried VR in a flight sim, and it had totally transformed everything that I was about in flight sims, right? So I've been simming for a long time. I'm 39 years old, and I've been doing this since I was 12, right? So FS4, FS 5.0. And so one of my dreams has always been to have a full-size cockpit, right? And all the switches, all the knobs, and have them in all the places in the cockpit that they would really be. And so when you reach over to, reset the bleeds, when you reach up to reset the bleeds, I wanted those bleeds to be right where they should be, and I wanted to reach as far over into the cockpit to actually flip those switches as you would in real life. And so I wanted to build this giant cockpit. Well, that takes a lot of money, obviously. I mean, people were doing it back in the day, and right out of high school, instead of making a lot of money, I went into the Marine Corps. And so I was in the military, and actually at the time in the military was the only time I had really had enough money saved up to actually make the dream happen. But then I'm in the military, and I'm moving from base to base. Who wants to take this giant cockpit with them or whatever? And then, after I got out of the military, the dream kind of died because life is life, and it costs a lot of money to live. And so, right. So then my wife ends up buying me these VR goggles, and next thing you know, I've got these controllers in my hand, And literally, I'm sitting in the Saab, the leading edge Saab 340, and to reset the bleeds, I have to reach out as far as you would in real life. And I'm like, holy freaking crap. Like, I am in the plane. It's not like I'm like looking at a 2D window of the plane. I'm like in the plane. So it was like total game changer for me. And yeah, like, I mean, you know, you trade some visual like resolution and like some blurriness for the immersion. Mm-hmm. But the immersion was just, it was it for me. Like, it was totally. So anyway, so I'm in this thing, and X-Plane baby VR comes out, right? It's in its infancy, and I'm sitting in like the Cessna 172, that X-Plane, the default one, and it's fine. Like, all the levers work and everything, but then when I jump into like an add-on plane, it's all jacked. Right, the whole thing is like, it just feels. And I know if you guys listening have tried an add-on aircraft that's not VR ready, you know what I'm talking about. All the switches are like either backwards or super touchy, or like they're not even like close to like how you would switch them in real life, and the levers, like you're lifting up and down to something that you should be pushing in and out, and so it's just like all wrong. And so I'm like, well, this can't be how it is. And so I waited for a little bit because I'm not very patient with this stuff, but I waited for a little bit to see if devs were going to get on board and like update their aircraft. And I found out quickly that no one knew how to do it. Like it wasn't that they didn't want to, it was that no one knew how. And so I'm like, okay, I've got to figure this thing out. So I took it upon myself to, sit back and figure it out. Literally, I took the Baron B-58, the default one. It was messed up, and it's a laminar default aircraft, but it was all messed up. You couldn't do the magnetos. When you tried to like do a mag check, it was so twitchy that you would go from both to off and cut the engine trying to do the mag check. I'm like, I can't even. So, and this is laminar. Like, it wasn't even right. And so I'm like,
the people who made the VR possible.
People that made the VR possible. I'm like, why? I'm like, how? And so I start going switch by switch, man, lever by lever, trying to figure it out. Like, what makes this thing tick? Like, what is it that makes this thing more sensitive or less sensitive? Is it possible for me to find a number in some file somewhere? Because X-Plane's like this giant like science project anyway. And so these files are like, you can just open them, most of them with like a text editor, and start doing stuff with them. I mean, everybody kind of knows that if you've dug into X-Plane. And so there's a thing called a VR config, and I learned about that. And then I learned about manipulators in another object file that are in all these aircraft folders. And so once I learned a little bit about it, I had a decision to make, right? So the decision is, I have this knowledge. I feel like I have a little bit more knowledge than any of the other devs out there in the VR world, right? I was literally the tip of the spear on this thing, right? And so I started fixing up a few aircraft. I fixed up the Baron and a few other little ones, and then I jumped right into the Saab, because that's still my favorite of all time, right? The Saab. And so I jumped into it, and that one took me like a month. It literally took me a month to fix. Now, I know that doesn't sound like it's that much time in like the flight simulator development world, but for this type of work, it is like it's a dizzying amount of time because of how tedious this could be, right, Matheson? It's just
definitely. Yeah.
I mean, so I'm sitting there, and I remember getting lightheaded at how much work I have to put into this thing, and how much I still don't know. Like, I knew enough to fix a switch, but I had no idea how to like fix a yoke, or like the yoke wasn't even like grabbable. Like, you'd reach out with your controller to try to touch. Some of this stuff just wasn't even like there. Like, it was there physically, but there was no like manipulator spot to grab and click and hold and move. And I'm like, man, what am I going to do? So I started reaching out to different people in the community, and one of them was Jan Martin Kroll from Starport Sceneries. This dude was a godsend to me, because he told me the missing link, which was a 3D modeling software that taught me about animations and stuff. And then I figured out how to grab how to get like how to basically make click spots for things that don't have click spots. Once I figured that out, I was just like, boom! I just went all over the place fixing up this aircraft. And so when I released it, everybody's like, "Oh my gosh, dude, you are a magician!" Like all these different things, and I'm like, "No, I'm not." I'm like, I just have like a ton of knowledge. Now, when you have that kind of knowledge and no one else has it, you really only have two options of what to do with it. Number one, you can turn it into money, right? So I could start selling these mods and making money on it or something, right? Or I need to get this knowledge out there. I need to get the stuff out there for people to enjoy, because I'm a huge believer and preacher of VR, right? And so people need to buy in to it, because I knew that there was people out there that were putting the VR goggles on, getting blown away by the experience, and then getting completely turned off because they tried to push the throttle forward and it didn't go forward, and then they lifted up and it went forward, and they're like, that's not even close to real. So they took the goggles off and that was it. And I'm like, I can't let that happen. Like people need to like jump on this, man. This is the future. So anyway, my choice was not to make money. My choice was to be generous, and because there's several reasons. But one was mostly because Flight Sim has done like so much for me. Like it really has. Like the community and just the friends that I've made in the Flight Sim community have always just kind of like kept me grounded through like some really dark times in my life. And so this was my way of giving back. So anyway, I did that, and then I started making tutorial videos, and then I started, basically I made a Discord channel, and I made a Facebook group, and then I made a website, and then I realized that I suck at like managing all that stuff, and my website ended up lapsing on its like hosting in like the first couple months, and people are like, "Oh, your website is now a GoDaddy site." I'm like, "What?" And so like so that's how I ended up on the Threshold site, as a club, right? Because I saw that Audiobird and some other like prominent people are doing are like going that way, and so I'm like, I'll just jump on this Threshold thing and get on the club, and it's been great. I mean, but yeah, there's a lot of tutorial videos and stuff about how I did what I did, and then Matheson was like my first. He literally, I think Matheson, were you my first protege? Yeah.
Yep. You taught me absolutely everything.
So he was my first. Like he's my. That was my SimVR learners, is what I called them. So, but anyway, I had a bunch of that I would sit and do like just take like hours and hours with people and just teach them how to do what I did, and hopefully I know that a lot of developers have upped their game on the VR compatibility of their aircraft that they put out there, and I hope that I can say that I had something to do with that, and something to hang my hat on. But at the same time, we still have a long way to go, as a lot of you know.
Hold on, let me jump in here for a second, because I'm sitting here listening to your story with my mouth wide open. That's an absolutely fascinating story from start to finish. I kid you not, I'm not even making that up. And I don't even use VR yet, and I say yet. But what I'm hearing you saying is that you wanted a full-fledged cockpit setup, which every simmer wants but just can't afford, or whatever. And you're saying the minute you tried VR, you literally had to you're self-taught to get everything working the way you wanted it. And that's fascinating to me, because I got to ask you, do you still want the full-fledged cockpit, or VR is it for you now?
No, VR is it for me, man. I can't, so what I do in my actual real life job is I put together big LED screens. I work for a company called Neoti, and Neoti manufactures these LED panels that go together to make huge screens. And one of our potential clients is Q4, I think it was their name. We went to their place, and they manufacture giant cockpits for these like commercial sims, right? It's this big deal. It's this big motion simulator, and it's like this 3D projection like thing that's like wrap around, and it's all this crazy stuff. And man, we went there and we were quoting curved LED screens to do their thing with, because they were trying. That's kind of the way of the future for that industry. But anyway, nah, man, I went there and I was talking to him, and I was sitting there and we were talking about all that. And I straight up told him, like, I didn't want to just like say, man, but I just told him, I said, I would rather be in the VR goggles with the controllers.
Oh, jeez.
And and they're like, what are you talking about? And I'm like, man, have you tried X-Plane? And they're like, no. And so I told, and I kid you not, I got an email from them 2 weeks later that said, we tried X-Plane in VR. We're interested in more. Can you help us? We have questions.
Oh my God.
So I'm telling you, man, like VR is such a game changer. It really is. And, the biggest, to me, the biggest thing that I hear against VR, and Matheson, correct me if I'm wrong, but the biggest thing that I hear about VR that's against it is the resolution when you're trying to do things like IFR, and you have to like write down things on a kneeboard, and you're like trying to talk to ATC, and they're giving you frequencies, and you're trying to make frequency changes, and there's a lot of little text that you have to look at and keep track of in an IFR scenario. And a lot of people would trade the immersion to get back that resolution and clarity and like simplicity of just a mouse and like being out of the goggles, right? Would you say that's correct, Matheson?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I think my biggest issue is, well, at least when I'm flying online, is that like I'll talk to ATC and I'll say clearance to wherever. Well, I'm in VR, right? I can't have a pen and paper with me and look down and freehand this clearance down that I can't see. So I need something that I can physically write on, or at least be able to see what I'm doing without really taking the headset off. And I think that's the biggest challenge for me, and that's the thing that is really quite demoralizing from time to time, is you just can't see what you're doing.
I mean, I got tons of questions. I mean, even before we even get that deep into the VR and what it is capable of and not, I stream, and every now and again people come up and say, hey, do you do VR stuff? I'm like, no, I don't do it. And my usual answer is, I feel like once I go VR, I'm not going to want to go back to a regular 3D, 2D cockpit. Is that really the case, or can I switch back and forth?
I don't think anyone well, if you have a good experience with VR for the very first time, I don't think you'll ever go back to flying a desk again.
Oh, I'm in trouble. Wow.
Yeah. I mean, if this is anything for you, Norm, too, I literally just tried VR this year. I went to PAX right before the virus got super bad, and I tried out the Vive there, and they had Beat Saber playing, and I've seen people play Beat Saber like all the time. Alex, who is our COO, plays Beat Saber a lot, not as much anymore, but it was used to be the running joke that he'd play it like religiously, and it looked kind of fun, and I didn't fully understand it, and I just have to say, like, I could spend literal hours doing that, and that's just something as simple as having these wands in your hand and hitting these blocks in directions. So I can't even imagine what it's like for a flight simulator. But I also think that what we were touching on just now with that whole thing where it's difficult because there are some trade-offs to being in VR, such as requesting a clearance and not being able to write things down. I feel like that's going to change really soon, because companies are already really expanding with augmented reality, and it feels as if they're trying to combine augmented reality with virtual reality to bring even more experiences. As two people who are a lot more in the VR game, and Norm and I aren't as much, would you say that that's true, that it's coming and those shortcomings will soon be
I think
resolved?
absolutely. Both major headsets, the Rift and the Vive, allow you to press a button, open up a menu, and then turn on the front-facing cameras. But I mean, the cameras aren't really good enough to the point that you can see your own writing. But like, it's going in the right direction. So once those cameras and then the display in the headset actually increases in quality, then you'll be able to press a button, write down your experience with a real pen and paper, look at it, read it back to ATC, and then be able to have that as a reference later on.
Yeah, there's also,
but we're just not quite there yet.
Yeah, the programming in Sim has a lot to do with it too. For example, there's a game out that's considered one of the biggest AAA games in VR right now called Half-Life Alyx, right? And so I got Half-Life Alyx because I'm a big fan. And the very first part, the opening part of Half-Life Alyx, is they drop you just outside this little house. And then you turn around and you go in the house, and there's a window, and the window's kind of dirty. And just under the window is a ledge with an eraser and a dry erase marker. And I spent about 2.5 hours doing nothing but just jaw-dropped drawing on this dirty window with this dry erase marker and just being blown away at the precision that I had. Like, the art I was making on this thing was crazy. And you can go on YouTube and you can see that teachers are using this little scene with this window and this dry erase marker to literally teach math to their students on Zoom right now, right? During the pandemic and stuff. And so if they can write all that, then of course, what does my mind go to? It goes to a knee board. I'm like, man, all we need is a knee board and the ability to have that kind of precision in the game to follow the tracking of the hand controller, and then you can write down your stuff. I mean, there's something sort of like that right now with Avatab in VR where you can write notes, but it's just kind of like, it's baby VR, it's infancy, like it's infant stuff, and you know, Laminar's got so many other things going on that we can't expect that that's going to get any better anytime soon. Mm-hmm. And so we do the best we can as add-on developers, like Foco, who made the Avatab and things like that, just things to try to make things better. And that's what kind of what it's all about. And that's what Laminar is leaning on a lot, is a lot of the third-party people to really make VR as best as it can be in XPlay.
Well, absolutely. There's another, I want to say it's a AAA title within VR. It's called Onward. It's a first-person, I want to say, milsim shooter. And there's a briefing room before you go into the operation where it's a dry erase board. You have your 3 colors, red, green, blue, and you got an eraser. And you can draw whatever the heck you want, right? It's amazing. It's the coolest thing ever. And everyone in that briefing room can, of course, see that dry erase board. It's absolutely incredible technology, and to be able to communicate that between each other and draw whatever the heck you want, it's cool. So I think that technology really needs to come to XPlane, and then that would be the thing that solves all issues.
Yeah, and you know, I want to make sure that people understand this. When you're in Half-Life Alyx and you're writing on the window, you're literally just, if people look at you outside of VR and they're looking at what you're doing, it looks like you're just waving your controller in the air. And so I know what people are thinking. They're like, well, how do you know if you're on the window or not? Well, there's haptic feedback in your controllers, and it gives you the sensation of boom, the tip of your the felt tip of your dry erase marker is literally on the window.
Really?
And you can feel it, and you can feel the squeaks and the eraser. It's the same thing with the eraser. And so when people are like, because I tune all of my, we at SimVRLabs, we tune all of our aircraft to work with the yokes and the throttle and everything with just VR controllers. Literally, if you want to have a good experience with the SimVRLabs tuned aircraft, and a lot of the devs are jumping on board with making their aircraft like this because there's a lot of VR controller flyers out there, is with the yoke, you can reach out and you can grab it, and you feel when you've grabbed it, and you're moving it along, and everybody's like, well, I don't just want to wave my controllers in the air. Well, your brain has this, with the haptic feedback, your brain has this way of making that work for you. And the advantage of it, obviously the disadvantage is you don't feel forces against you. The advantage of it is, though, is that that whole dream of being in the cockpit becomes more real, because the throw of the yoke going all the way back and all the way forward is the same throw that you would have in real life. And the turn, like if I had a what would be like a Cytec yoke or whatever, and then you turn it all the way left, and all you could do is 45 degrees left, and then you hit your physical stop. Well, in the sim, you're getting a full 90 degrees to the left. Well, now there's a little bit of a disconnect there. Well, and if you're using VR controllers to do the yoke, then you're always going to be in sync with the actual throw distance and everything else. And the same thing with the throttle, and then the reverse thrust, and the props of the mixture, and all the different levers, and even like things like the carb heat, like pulling out the little carb heat thing. We make it to where you pull it out the same distance that you would literally grab it and pull it out. So the haptic feedback in the VR controllers is a real thing. And, I know there's a lot of skeptical people. It's like, oh, I don't know if fly just with, just grabbing air with my VR controller. Well, nobody kind of does. But I tell you, I have an X52 HOTAS system, and that's in the closet. Now,
really?
I'm a helicopter guy, right? And so if I had a nice full set of like a PFT Puma or something, then obviously I would use that with the collective and the full thing. I would obviously use a really nice set before I'll use VR controllers. But until then, this is my compromise: is I want to reach down, grab the collective, and pull it up. And I want to pull it up the same distance that I would pull it up in real life. And I want to push it down the same distance I would push it down in real life. Rather than sliding forward and back a HOTAS controller, right? And having that sticky plastic, spring jumpiness going on. You know what I'm saying? You need that precision in a helicopter. You can get away with it a lot with aircraft, but in a helicopter, man, you got to have the micro precision.
Absolutely,
I know a lot of guys that just cut the spring right off, but anyway.
Jeez.
No, I mean, you're talking about that haptic feedback thing and people being skeptical. And when you were saying it initially, I hadn't even thought about that being a possibility. And I was kind of like, Joe, I don't think you know what you're talking about. But then I was thinking about how I have a MacBook Pro, and I have one of the ones with the haptic feedback on for the mouse pad. And you were talking about that whole thing with your brain. Once you got to that point, I can totally see where you're coming from there, as somebody who hasn't experienced it myself, because I know that, if this is maybe something that people have more commonly done, if you've ever used one of the new MacBooks and you click on the thing, that's a haptic feedback. The glass doesn't actually move.
Your trackpad
it feels
doesn't
like you're
click.
actually clicking.
Yep, your trackpad does the same thing with my
and
phone.
I guess it's
my
like the same
iPhone
principle.
XR.
Yeah.
It feels like a click screen, but there is no click. It's just the haptic feedback at the right moment with the right amount of pressure. It feeds back to your finger, and you feel it. So I could just imagine sitting in the cockpit flipping switches with a little bit of feedback at your fingertips that says, yes, that switch is flipped. So you have the sound, you have the little bit of feel in your fingertips, and you can visually see it. That probably is enough for your brain to say, yeah, we're good.
Yep.
So tell us, how do you think that, not how, what do you think needs to happen in order for the simulation experience to be completely seamless and everything to be perfect for you to like never ever consider just looking at a screen ever again? Is it like a new product, or is it a new type of way that you integrate things? How do you foresee that happening.
Matheson, do you want to take this one?
I never really got to introduce myself.
Actually, how about that's a good point. Let's jump back. Matheson, how about you introduce yourself and you tell us, how you started working for SimVRLabs and just, shoot it.
Well, to start off, I don't know. I've been with X-Plane for probably about 10 years now, just coming up on 10 years. And Joe and I actually started out with a very similar path. At the time, I was just a wee little lad, and aviation's always been my passion since I was a 6-year-old. And I always dreamed about, the day that I move out, I'll build a full-size cockpit in my basement, right? And I'll be able to fly these amazing full-size aircraft in the comfort of my basement. But I know as time got on, I realized that that's just not realistic. I mean, there's some people that are making their millions and they can afford to do that, but realistically, that's not going to happen. So a few years later, I stumbled across a VR, and I was like, "Oh, now that's amazing. Now what if we pair that with a flight sim? I wonder how that would go." So that was just a thought, and then it faded from my memory until X-Plane announced that they're getting VR support. And then once that fully came out, I was watching some videos online about it. I was thinking, that's amazing. I think I need to get one of these things. So sure enough, within like a week later, I had my hands on a Vive. It was the, what was the original Vive? Was it just a Vive? It was just a Vive. Anyways, the first Vive that came out. Had my hands on it, loaded up in the default 172, and I was just amazed. Right, you reach out, and the throttle is exactly where it is. Right, all the lights, the circuit breakers behind the yoke, they're exactly where it is. You look behind you, you can see the back seats, exactly what they are in real life. And I'm a 172 driver, so I use VR a lot for flight training, so I can stay current without actually, not legally current, but I can stay proficient without flying the real plane, and that's absolutely priceless to me. So I don't need to go and book a really expensive plane just to practice, slow flight or navigation or whatever. And so anyways, this 172 is just perfect, amazing. It could get some work in hindsight with the manipulators, but the scale of things, the textures, the way everything looks, just perfect. So then I'm thinking, okay, let's load up a different plane. So the plane that I was flying at the time that I really enjoyed was the Soulmate Sim Beaver. And I loaded that thing up, and it was just a complete nightmare. Right, buttons didn't work. I would turn a switch to the right, and then it would flick a million times back and forth between the on and off position. The yoke was non-existent. I couldn't grab it. Throttles, you moved your hand up instead of pushing the hand forwards. Doors didn't work. It was terrible. So then I'm thinking, oh, well, how do I get this thing to work? Surely there's got to be some way that I can make this thing work, because, well, the 172 works. So me being the guy that I am, once I get set my mind to something, I'll do it, or at least I'll try my very best until there's a physical roadblock in the way that I can't do it. So I'm not sure exactly how I got in contact with Joe, but he offered his hand out and was like, "I'll help you. Let's get this thing working." So it was, I don't know, probably about 2 weeks of working to get this Beaver working. And at that point, he was doing most of the work, right? Just trying to tell me, well, okay, this number, if you move it to 1, it'll now do this. But if you set it to 0, it'll do that. Right? And then you want this manipulator because this manipulator does this. And you don't want this manipulator because this manipulator does that, right? Just explaining everything to me. And it was like opening up that closet that takes you to Narnia, like a completely different world, something that I couldn't wrap my head around. So then I found the X-Plane development forum that Joe kept kept linking to me, and I was reading through that, and it's all gibberish, right?
Jeez.
So I'm asking Joe, like, how does any of this stuff apply? And I don't know how it all worked, but eventually I was able to do probably about the other half of the plane myself. And then Joe would help me tweak some things up and answer all the questions, kind of hold my hand throughout the process. Then we eventually released it. And I finally had that beaver that I loved to fly in VR. Now, it took like a month of solid work just to get this thing to the point where you could fly it. But Joe had now taught me everything that I needed to know to progress into something a little bit more complex. So, and I think the plane that I ventured into next was, I think it was the X-Craft's Embraers.
You jumped right in. You jumped right into the deep end, dude.
Oh boy, yeah, that was. I thought the beaver was bad. Absolutely not. That was the X-Craft's Embraers. I could not think of a plane that is just. There's nothing worse that a beginner could pick up than those planes, and that's not saying anything bad against the dev teams, but it's an old product now, right? It was built for what, X-Plane 10 back in the day, I think. They're all using panel manipulators, which those don't work at all for VR. They just don't work. And that's fine. That's the standard that it was way back in the day. But now that we have all these different types of manipulators, it doesn't work. So anyways, I needed to end up taking the entire plane, like the entire manipulator system apart. I ended up building a brand new cockpit OBJ from scratch. Joe ended up custom coding some switches so that way it worked somewhat decently to the point where we can actually use it in VR. Now, it still doesn't work perfectly, but at least it's at the point that we can use it. And oh boy, that was a huge project. So once we finally got those planes done, that was like, okay, well, I've now done that. What can't I do at this point? So then I started working on some personal projects and trying to get things working with different airplanes, trying my very best to learn what I can by myself. And then I started talking to some developers, and I'm like, hey, I think it was SSG that I reached out to first, saying, I really love your 747. This was version 1 at the time. Would it be okay if I work on an unofficial modification for it, so that way I can bring VR support to it, so that way everyone can enjoy it in VR that use it? And they were like, sure, that's great. We already had someone trying to work on it before, but they didn't succeed. They ended up giving up for whatever reason. So I start working on this plane, and then they reach out again and they say, would you like to work on our 747-8? And I was like, of course. Yeah, sure. Like,
of course.
why would I say no, right? Let's make a plane work in VR from day one. Let's make it usable for everyone in VR from day one, so that way it's feature rich, and it won't need an unofficial mod that people have to go and find online somewhere, right? So anyways, run into some issues with that one.
Right.
Get it working mostly. Not really going to go into detail why it doesn't have support anymore, but anyways, that's how my endeavor started with payware developers and making the planes VR ready from the get-go.
So you guys are officially the guys behind the scenes then, doing way more than we even think is going on just looking at our regular flat panel monitors here.
So I want to say yes, but I also want to say no. Part of both of our goals here, Joe and I, is to help third-party developers make their products VR compatible from the get-go. And ideally, like Joe and I, we don't really want to be working on every single aircraft that comes out, right? That's not realistic. So if we can teach the developers how to do it themselves, that adds so much more value than just 2 or 3 guys working on these planes that may or may not be possible to add VR functionality after the fact, after they're released, right?
Right.
So that was the goal, is to get these developers up to speed, educate them on how the VR world works and how they can build their aircraft to be suitable for the minority of VR users.
Any one of the major Airbus or Boeings at a great level of VR right now? Maybe the Zibo or the Flight Factor or the Tolus?
There's a lot of them. So the Zibo mod, for sure, that one we haven't touched it. Zibo has done a fantastic job of ensuring that the plane stays in good VR shape. Laminar was actually the ones that built that support from the start, and of course Zibo builds on the Laminar 737. For Airbus's, Thales has a really good VR system. I think it's one of the best available. I just finished working with Cremonasoft on their A310. That one has probably fantastic VR support. Just the way they built the plane allows it to be thrown into VR and work probably better than most other planes. The
IXEG is no better,
absolutely.
But we had that for like 2 years. We had that thing on lockdown as far as just working really well in VR as long as you download the SimVRLabs mods. They were really kind. This is how it works. So back in the day, I would get flooded with requests. This is when it all was starting and I was releasing, and they were like, "Oh, can you do this plane? Can you do this plane?" And I'm like, I can't just do any plane, because it's one thing to add a VR config file. It's another thing to modify their cockpit OBJ, and it's two things. It's a twofold work job. It's making or modifying a VR config file, and modifying or whatever their cockpit OBJ. And so to do both, now all of a sudden you've put a mod out there that does some things. So you need permission. And so we would have to ask permission, and usually the answer was yes, but we won't support your mod. And so if anything happens, we're not going to, and they're using your mod, we can't give them any kind of support. And so I'd be like, that's fine. So disclaimer, blah, blah, blah. And so then we would build out the mod. IXEG was super happy. The majority of the reception back in the day was just, oh, please, thank you. Thank you for contacting me. Yeah. What's going to happen is that we'll look at what you did, hopefully either reverse engineer it, or you can help us make it official at some point. It's kind of like the Hot Start TBM 900. When it came out, they released it, and it was, I've been watching the streams and everything, the development work on that one as it was getting ready to release. And I sent out a request to them before they released it. And I said, can you please just let me take a look at it? And Goran, the guy who does the 3D work and all the manipulator work for that, had seen what I had done with his Saab 340. And he was, he was real friendly, real kind, and he's like, let's just release it. So they released it, and I bought it day one, and I'm like, oh, it's so jacked up, like it's so messed up. I was like, there's so many things you can't even grab. Like there was manipulators that when Matheson said panel manipulators don't work in VR, what he didn't like really emphasize is they literally don't work at all. You can't grab it. It's like trying to grab air. There's nothing there to click on. And so it only works with a mouse pointer. It does not work with a VR controller. And there was a couple of those in there, and I was like, no. And so I was like, okay, I am going to I stayed up all night on a bend, and I just binge fixed that thing, right? And I sent it off to Goran, and I sent it off to Toto Sasso, and I gave them a video. I sent the files, and I made a video, and I said, this is what I did. Please do this, change this, and you'll be all good, because everything I did fixed the VR and did nothing to compromise the 2D, like the non-VR. And they're like, they took like, it was probably 15 minutes, I got a response that said, "We want to ship this in the next update. This is great, excellent, beautiful."
Wow.
And so sometimes it works like that, and
Oh,
other times,
damn.
like the toe list was all jacked up, and I requested a thing, and they said no, we're going to do it ourselves. And guess what? They did it themselves, and they did a great job. Did they do it as quick as I
Absolutely.
could have done a mod? No, but people were patient, and I was like, they're gonna be okay. Just relax, and so sometimes but that's kind of how it works, and that's how it's been. SimVRLabs is really slowed down on the stuff that Matheson was talking about, where it's like third party, and is really steady
Right.
in things that are quote unquote official.
Absolutely.
Gotcha.
I think we've pretty much succeeded with our goal at this point. Like we've got partnerships with developers where we're adding VR support natively to be included with the plane, or we've succeeded in teaching the dev teams how to make their aircraft VR ready from the get-go, so they can do it themselves, so they can add it to their next product right from scratch. And that's why things have slowed down a bit. But it hasn't slowed down a bit for bad reasons. Slow down a bit because we're just running out of things to do, right?
Right.
And that's amazing to see.
So are you afraid that you're going to be out of the business at any point, or does the elephant in the room, FS 2020, or just anything in general, give you confidence that you guys are going to be able to keep working?
If we do run out of things to do, if it does come time that there's just nothing else for us to do, it's for a good reason, at least, right? There's either all the dev teams that are making competent products have mastered VR themselves, or it's because we've moved on to a different simulator. Now, if that's FS 2020, maybe if it's X-Plane, like X-Plane 12, whatever it is later down the road, sure. But I think we'll run out of things to do because developers are doing it all themselves, and I think that's a really good reason to be shutting down.
So that means
because
you'd have accomplished part of the things that you set out to do when you guys
Absolutely.
just started doing VR, basically, is to get everybody on board to get this game up and running good.
Absolutely. And it's not just, you have to remember that when FS 2020 comes out, there will be no VR until there is. And then when there is, VR in the mainstream will be 2021 and not 2018 of March 2018. So March 2018, everything was baby. Everything was in its infancy with VR. And so I think FS 2020, when they finally do VR, they're going to do it in a way that they're going to look at how other flight sims have done VR and how other flight sims are doing it well and how they're not doing it well. And they're going to apply, some of those methods to it. And so because, VR and DCS is kind of a totally different world when it comes to how they do their manipulators and stuff versus VR in X-Plane and how you would control the switches and stuff in there too. So they're going to take, I have a lot of confidence in FS 2020 that they're going to take a good look at how everybody else is doing things and try to do the best they can with what they see. And hopefully, Matheson and I and some of the other SimVRLabs guys can be proud of what we accomplished and proud of how we sort of, ushered VR into the flight sim community as best as we could.
Of course. And, who knows? Like FS 2020, it's a brand new platform, right? It's still based on the FSX days. But, I mean, the VR for FS 2020 will be completely brand new. So who knows how they'll do it? Will they have a very similar cockpit OBJ VR config system? Probably not. So, I mean, people really need to go in and learn a brand new system.
Right.
So will that be Joe and I that does that? Will that be someone else from the SimVRLabs team? Maybe. Or will that be Asobo themselves helping the third-party developers? Who knows, right? But it's a brand new system, so I don't really know how that'll plan out for the future.
I can actually hear you guys getting excited already. To be honest, I could.
Oh, I'm very
I could.
excited
I
for it.
could see your guys' brains working, going, "Yeah, I want to get our hands on this and see what this is all made of. Something
Yeah,
new to
man.
start over again."
I'm not part of the alpha, and I'm super jealous.
Welcome to the club. I understand. Definitely. Let me step back a second here because I mentioned before I've never used VR. I think I looked at the goggles one time and it was like trash. This is years ago. So for the new flight simmer or people who have been in flight sim and never touched VR before, between you guys, what is the base hardware, CPU, GPU that you would recommend to get started, and what goggles? And just basically, for somebody new into it, I mean, what do you need to get started in this thing?
I think you've just opened up Pandora's box.
Oh boy.
Yeah.
Well, you need $600
Right.
to buy the goggles. No, so well, while there's a lot of truth to what I just said, um, I'm running still Oculus Rift CV1, right? The very first iteration of the Oculus Rift. Most of my peers and compadres have moved on to at least the Rift S, if not the Vive Pro or the Reverb or the Reverb Pro. The Reverb Pro, by the way, is the one that's getting just crazy good reviews.
Yeah.
So, just based on what I've seen, I've never put it on my head, but based on what I've seen as far as people getting, reviewing them for X-Plane, the Reverb Pro is getting some great reviews. But I am running the CV1 on a Ryzen, actually, at 3.7 gigahertz and with a 1070 NVIDIA card. And it locks at 30 frames a second, and my settings are high on the textures, high on the whatever, and the other one, and medium on the autogen, and then obviously reflections are turned all the way down, and HDR on the other setting so I can get some lights at night with my landing lights and stuff. But yeah, so and it holds pretty good at 30 frames a second. It locks into something called ASW, which is a thing that makes it feel like 90 frames a second rather than 30 frames a second. Like it's kind of like some hocus pocus that they do. But so there's some magic numbers that you want to lock onto on frame rate when you start dealing with frame rates in VR. And Matheson probably knows a lot more about this and can explain it better. But when you start dealing with frame rates with VR, you have to kind of forget everything you know about what's great. And because
absolutely
50 frames a second in VR is terrible. You want to lock on to 30 or 45 or something where ASW can take over and make it super smooth, right? And so which there are tools to help you lock that frame rate that usually come with the software, like the Oculus has its own deal going on. But yeah, so that's kind of how that works. But so it's a fairly modest at this point. It's a fairly modest machine, and it gets the job done. That being said, everybody wants more, and of course I want more. If I had a Reverb Pro trying to run off my Ryzen, I would be in trouble, right? I need more horsepower to drive more pixels. So.
Now, let me know if I got ripped off then. Sorry. So let me just say this. Tell me if I got ripped off. When I bought my Dell, it said it came VR ready, but I have no idea what that meant.
No.
I have a 1070 Ti, 8 gigabytes video RAM, and I have a Core i7, was it 8700K, something like that. Would that be good or that be bad?
Yeah, what is it? What does your 8700K run at on the gigahertz?
I think it maxes at like either 3.9 or 4.2 or so. I don't remember. I gotta look at it.
Yeah, that's if that's all it maxes at, then that's where your choke point's going to be. Your 8700 or your 1070 Ti is going to be better than what you're pushing on your gigahertz there. you would hope that would be up a lot, around 4.6, 4.8. If you're really, a lot of these guys, man, they're trying everything they can to overclock up to 5, right? When you're pushing just really hard VR and you're trying, the best you can to get the best graphics you can. But again, this is where Matheson's probably in a much better position to answer these questions.
So my take on it is actually very different. I've got from what I've been told, it's a tank sitting under my desk. I've got a 2080 Ti, a 3950X, that's a Ryzen processor, and then, of course, 32 gigs of RAM. Now, that's also coming from a 1080 with a 7700K at 5 gigahertz. So my Ryzen, it's running out, I think it's at like 3.4 gigahertz, I think. I'm seeing about a 5 frames per second increase with this machine. It's not, I don't want to say it's entirely dependent on gigahertz and megahertz, because it is, but it isn't. I don't fully understand it. But I think it has more of a combination effect. So your cores, your gigahertz, what's the other one that I'm thinking of? Threads. So I think it's more of a combination effect, and how each one plays together that determines what your performance will be. So AMD processors, from my understanding, is that they've got a significantly lower frequency than the Intel ones, but they also have a lot more cores and a lot more threads. So I think mine has, I think it's like 12. I'm not sure, but anyways, I'm up about 5 FPS from my old machine. But of course, if you're wanting to get into VR, I would not recommend this machine. It costs way too much than you'll ever see benefit in VR. So realistically, to get into VR, you're probably looking at about 1070 with I'd say about a 7700K. And then you'll be able to run X-Plane at about medium-high settings with fluid frames. But that's also not taking into account scenery, plugins, all the other enhancements and things that run inside X-Plane that'll tank your FPS.
Right.
So vanilla,
the Vulkan has really helped.
Oh, definitely. Yeah.
Lower the entry point for a decent X-Plane VR experience.
Definitely. With my machine on Vulkan, I'm running. I've got about 30 or so FPS inside VR in Fly Tampa's new Vegas with Active Sky on, like Overcast, all the really dependent add-ons running. So it works, but I mean 30 is not ideal for me. I'd like to be at about 45. I think that's my personal sweet spot. But I mean, there's ASW, there's a whole bunch of other tricks up the sleeve to be able to run X-Plane at, I'd say, about 25 FPS is fine for most people, right? You add ASW in there and you're golden.
So, technical question: what's happening to you visually in the VR at 30 FPS versus 60 FPS? What's happening to you visually? How would you describe that?
Is it like a nausea thing? Because I know that's I feel like I remember reading somewhere that that's one of the reasons why movies are actually set to be a certain frames per second, because if it's too high, then we actually start to get like nauseous.
There's a nausea factor to VR, especially at first. I know the first time I tried it, I could only go about an hour, and then you don't really feel it creeping up until you take the goggles off, and then you're like, oh crap, man, I don't feel so great. But I don't think that really has a whole lot to do with 30 versus 60. Here's my experience with 30 versus even 90, because if you turn everything down, you can lock at 90 in VR. When you're at 90 in VR, the smoothness versus 30 in VR, there's not that much of a difference. What there is a little bit of difference in is at 30 in VR with ASW on, you do get some like artifacting, right? And it's small, but it's there.
It looks like heat haze is what I'm seeing. It looks like almost as if you're looking at like a jet engine from the back. You get little tiny flickers of like heat haze. So it's not terribly distracting, but it's there. It's really kind of weird to describe, but heat haze is what I really like to describe it as.
Yes,
like
and it's
shimmering.
Yeah, it's like a shimmer, and it's really only that like so. I'm crop dusting quite a bit in the sim right now with a helicopter, and you see it every time you're humming along down low towards the ground, and you look out your cockpit, and you look at your crop dusting spray kit that's mounted to your thing, and then you see the ground kind of humming underneath that bar out there, and you can see the bar kind of shimmer, and that's kind of like where you'll see it is sort of at your peripheral vision, or if you've got fast motion up against like something that's more stationary. That's where ASW will do this haze thing, and again, it's like this hocus pocus that makes it super smooth, but there are some compromises there. For me, I don't mind it as much because I'm so stinking used to it, and I just want a smooth simulator. Like, I'm not going to turn it off. I'm not going to turn ASW off. You have that option, but dude, I would be at about 37 FPS if I turned ASW off, and that is not good. That is where you'll really get nauseous. Like, you'll see all this ghosting. Like, you'll take your controller in front of your face and then just sort of like move it across your vision, and you'll see like a ghost controller behind you kind of following you because everything is just so jacked up. You need that ASW on. But yeah, that's the difference in what I see.
Exactly. So my experience with that is very similar. For me, the sweet spot is really anything above 30 frames up to about 45. Anything above 45 for me is wasted potential, right? You might as well turn up your settings and get some more out of your sim because you really can't tell the difference. And then up to a certain point, it actually gets worse. But anything below 30, you're going to start to see like a ghost controller, right? Your controller it'll move at the same speed, but you'll see a few really tiny trails. It's almost like if you move your mouse really fast across your screen, you'll see a bunch of ghost images, right, from where your cursor was. It's that, but not as pronounced in VR. And things will just feel really sluggish, right? You'll need to move your hands a further distance just to click a button. Like, for example, you'll need to, if it's like a two-stage button, you'll need to move it probably twice the distance to actually activate that button than you would need to otherwise.
And you'll be done. You'll be in that state for about 10 seconds.
Exactly.
And you'll be like, this is crap, and you'll take the goggles off.
And then
you'll be like, how do I fix this? Because this ain't working. Yeah.
There's a lot of times where I'm actually running at 25 frames. Like, I'm flying on VATSIM, and I've got flying into like I don't know, LA. LA is a really heavy area. If you pair that with a lot of traffic and some weather, I'll be running at like 23, 25 frames. It's not fun, and I'll actually start to get sick. There's been times where I need to disconnect, take my headset off, go for a walk because I'll get sick and I'll get a really bad headache. It's not fun. So there's definitely compromises. For a newbie, I'd say you need to learn your system. Fly in LA with high settings, then turn your settings down one notch until you finally get it to the point where it's okay for LA. Right? Then if you go all the way up to like, I don't know, Cambridge Bay, way up in like northern Canada, where there's absolutely nothing there but water, then turn your settings up to the point where it's okay for that area. And then you need to kind of find the sweet spot in between those two and adjust your settings for your flight. I'm constantly adjusting them back and forth. There's not a flight where I load up and I don't adjust my settings. If I'm flying into Toronto, my settings will be pretty much all the way down, just because I need that FPS boost. Otherwise, I'll get sick.
So it's kind of like how a lot of simmers just tweak their settings, regularly in general. Like I do that, um, because sometimes I'll install an add-on that I really want to have, but also it compromises my frames a little bit. But it's just doing that over and over and just finding that spot that either works the best for certain
Absolutely.
areas or works the
Yeah,
best for
it's
the
not
type of
much
flight
different
that you want
than
to do.
how you would do it in non-VR.
Right. Now, I mean, does that get annoying ever, having to constantly switch settings, or does it become second nature at some point?
Second nature if you're doing that quite a bit. I'm not always flying from Indiana into downtown Chicago on every flight. But if I know that's going to happen, I'm flying from literally
Right.
nothing cornfields to downtown Chicago. I can't leave everything on high in HDR, and that's true in VR or not in VR. Like, there comes a point where you're just not going to suffer, 18 frames a second, no matter
Yeah.
what you're in. So you're going to adjust your settings, but most of the time,
Right.
I'm not constantly adjusting like Matheson, but I don't fly the big iron like Matheson does either. He puts more miles on. I mean, I don't know if you watch his streams. He's in these big aircraft putting a bunch of miles. I'm more of a VR helicopter guy, so it's not as much of a challenge for me.
Right.
So Matson is a guy I need to talk to about because I don't do any GA flying whatsoever. I love the big iron. I love the tube liners. And you stream those, Matson, also the tube liners?
Every once in a while, if it's a flight that I'm flying from, like Edmonton to Winnipeg, where there's really nothing to see, it's nice and flat. I'll throw up a stream, right? Because I have extra frames that I can spare, right? I've got hardware potential that I might as well use. If I'm flying, I don't know, like the new Global Art Vancouver, which is very, very, very heavy on frames, to Global Art Toronto, which is again very heavy on frames, I won't stream that because I can't afford to lose that performance.
That extra performance, yeah. Because I mean, I've known maybe 3 streamers who stream in VR. Or I've tried a couple of them, and then one guy does it religiously, the other guy stopped doing it. So I would love to watch more streamers do the VR stuff, and maybe myself eventually get into it. You know what I mean? I always tell them that, hey, listen, I think once I go VR, I'm never going to go back, and that's why I haven't even looked at it yet.
For sure.
Yeah.
Oh,
I'm still waiting for it to come up.
I definitely think you won't go back. And I guess we didn't really answer what headset would be best for the newbies getting into it. My personal recommendation is go with I think it's the Reverb G2 that's coming out. It's set to release really soon. It's at a very competitive price point, and it's one of the best headsets out there for in terms of specifications. Now, of course, it's a headset that's not released. I can't exactly say it's this fantastic, life-changing miracle product because I don't know, right? Nobody knows yet. But if what they're advertising is correct, it'll be this really, really, really amazing headset for a fraction of the price as the competitors.
Wow. Is that the HP product? I'm looking at it.
I believe, it's the HP Reverb G2. So it's got comparable specs to the Index, to the I think the Pimax, the what is it, the 16K or no, the 8K. I don't know, one of those really high end. I don't really follow the headset market too often, but comparable to the really high end headsets for a very, very small price tag.
Gotcha.
One thing that happens, Norm, is you spend a lot of money on a VR headset, and then you stop looking at what else is out because you're like, wow, this is mine for 4 more years. Like there's nothing. Yeah. So
it's like a new car, right? You almost have to finance it, right?
Yeah.
And then you're stuck with this thing because you just invested how much money into it. But I mean, they're releasing
$500,000.
Yeah, they're more because you got to get the computer for it, right? So you've invested all this money into it, and then 2 years later they come out with a brand new headset. Well, you still haven't recuperated the price, so you can't justify paying that much more for the latest and greatest.
Yeah. So you just have to make your headset yours.
Exactly. Yeah. Wear it down until it
True.
doesn't work anymore, or wear it down to the point where the new headsets are just so much better than what you have right now that it's really worth every penny to upgrade.
So here's my question. Before we begin to wrap up, we've been talking about all the benefits of VR, excuse me, and the ways to get into VR. In your opinion, who isn't VR for? Who shouldn't be listening to this conversation and immediately, or not immediately, or consider getting a headset? What's the audience of people who should maybe wait until either it's evolved more or just waited in general?
I want to say people that are very susceptible to inner ear. I want to say, is it vertigo? It's one of those conditions,
imbalance.
right? Imbalance. That's what I'm looking for. People that are really susceptible to those,
yeah.
I would say stay very clear away from VR. Otherwise, you're going to have a bad day. I know a few people that have vertigo and have tried VR, and it's not good for them. I'd also say people with disabilities, right, that have like limited mobility, that can't really reach up as far. You could try it, but it might not be the same experience for you. The nice thing about at least X-Plane VR is you squeeze the controller's trigger a little bit, and then you get like a little lightsaber, right? A little laser that comes out of the controller, and you can point that up at a switch and then flick it. So you really don't need to move a whole lot. But then you should really ask yourself, is that experience worth it? And for some, it definitely is. For me, not really. I'd much rather reach up physically and have the sensation of actually grabbing a switch. But for some, that might not really be worth it, because that's really the whole point of VR, is being able to reach up, grab whatever you're looking for, rather than use like a laser and kind of turn something that's way out in front of you. So should people stay away from it if they have disabilities? Maybe not. That's totally up to the person though. But it's something that should be warned, and it should be something that they should proceed with caution.
My dad hates VR. He's tried it several times. He's a big flight simmer, and before I did the VR thing, I helped him build a cockpit in his in his living room, which my mom loves. But it's the Arduino card and the whole deal with all the switches and all the little Chinese like little switches and encoders and stuff. And he's got a separate screen that he uses just as a dedicated GPS. He's got the full thing with the yoke and the full thing. And he comes over, and because I'm so excited about VR, I can't stop talking about it when we talk about flight sim. And he comes and he tries it, man. He puts it on his head. He's got these big glasses that he has to wear. By the way, for people who don't know, if you need corrective vision glasses or contacts, you need those in VR.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. For whatever reason, the sense of space is still the sense of space, and things that are far away are still far away. Like it's weird. I know it's weird if you haven't tried it. It's weird to hear about. But like, you can't read the writing if you can't read the writing. If it's 5 feet away and you can't read it in real life, you won't read it in VR for sure. So you need your glasses. So my dad, he puts these things on over his glasses, and he hums around and has a fun time for like 10 minutes, and then he takes it off. He's like, I just want my cockpit. He wants what he's used to, and he wants to click and feel and twist and push and all the things that he has. He's kind of a creature of habit. And so if you're if you're in that space and you're a creature of habit and you like things the way they are, and you're kind of like not necessarily afraid to learn something completely new and feel something completely new, but you just like it the way that it is, and you just get so much satisfaction out of the way that it is with your TV and your speakers and your cockpit and your whole deal. If all of that's fine and you're perfectly satisfied, I would say, stick with it, man. Just stick with what you like and do what you like and try it. Try it like my dad did. Try it, and if you don't like it, or if it's like not for you for the long term, then whatever. But I would say, Norm, you need to run, not walk. You need to run and get you into some sort of VR headset and get into an aircraft. And I'm saying this is just even to try it somewhere. Get into an aircraft that you know is good, Zebo. Get into the Zebo. You're familiar with it enough that you would know where everything is, but when you sit in it and you're in it and your shoulder is like a foot away from the actual like sidewall bulkhead of the aircraft, it's just something that's kind of like otherworldly until you try it. So,
jeez. Yeah. So it's basically 1-for-1 representation in the VR.
Yes, as long as the developers got their scale right. There's a lot of aircraft out there where the actual exterior scale of the aircraft is very well done, but the interior they took some liberties on in their 3D model on the actual scale of it. So some of the aircraft aren't, and so VR doesn't let you lie like that. Like 2D would let you like lie about that, but VR will call you out on it, man. It's like, why are my pedals like 3 feet away from each other? Like I got to spread my. But anyway,
Jesus, I can imagine. Wow. No, it's good stuff. It's gonna happen. It's not a matter of if; it's just a matter of when for me. How much space do you need in front of your desk or in front of you when you're using the VR to click and stuff?
That's a good question. That's a real good question. Matheson, why don't you take this
one? Oh boy, it all depends on what aircraft you're going to fly, right? If you're wanting to fly, an A380 with a huge cockpit, you're going to want probably the equivalent space if you really want to take advantage of VR. If you really want to be able to reach around and jump from seat to seat and be able to reach everything properly, yeah, you want about that same size. But if you just want to fly from one seat only and reach just the switches that you're supposed to be reaching for, then honestly, I have probably about a 2 square meter space that I use, and that's fine. I can reach around everywhere. I don't hit anything. You don't need to worry about damage anything, and it's great. So it all depends on what aircraft you want to fly and what experience you're wanting to get out of it. If you're okay with using those lightsaber laser things I was telling you about earlier, then you don't need space at all. You can just sit in like a 2 square foot box, right, and fly in VR. It works just fine. But if you want to really be able to reach up and grab everything, then that's totally aircraft specific.
One of the paradigm shifts that I had to make when I first started VR was this exact thing. And you're so used to, as a simmer for years and years and years, sitting at a desk.
Yeah.
Right. You're sitting and your legs are there with the desk, and under the desk is your pedals, and then on the desk is your yoke, and you've got the mouse. And what I had to learn to do was push back away from that. So what I do, and some people turn themselves completely sideways.
I do.
Like facing sideways, their desk is off to the left, but their VR room is set up to where you have nothing in front of you, nothing behind you, and you can reach all the way to the left and still not hit your desk, and all the way to the right, and do all that. I push back. When I'm in VR, I'm probably 4.5, 5 feet back from my desk, and
Wow.
and so anytime I need to use my desk, then I'm on a office chair with wheels. I'll just kind of scoot forward, grab the mouse, do what I need to do, pull up whatever I need to pull up, and then push back, get back on the pedals, and get back to work. So that's kind of how I do it. Matheson's kind of a wizard with it, because if you watch his streams, you'll see how he does it, and how he's kind of like closer a little bit to his desk, but he's at that like perfect window where he doesn't hit anything with his little VR controllers. But he's kind of got it dialed in perfectly. And then if you like I said, if you watch a stream, you'll see what I'm talking about. But there's a lot of guys who do things differently in that way. But you definitely can't be up on your desk, or you'll just be hitting things, right?
Yeah. I've changed I've changed the way that I sit now. I've moved into a new room now, so I have actually allocated and built in a space where I can play my VR games and like room scale VR games fine. But then if I want to fly, I use a honeycomb yoke, right, and thrustmaster pedals. So I need to be able to actually reach those hardware, that hardware. But I need to be able to clamp it somewhere. And there's some people that go all out and they build like these PVC stands where they can clamp their whole yoke and pedals into it. And it's awesome. It's really cool stuff to see. But I've got an L-shaped desk. So the small side of my desk, the one side, it's got my 2 monitors on it. It's got my keyboard. But then the other side, I just turn 90 degrees to the right. And then I've got nothing in front of me. So I can reach out as far as I want, and I can grab whatever I want, right? So it's nice and simple. I just turn 90 degrees, grab my yoke, and fly. Right. There's so many different ways to do it, though.
Yeah, the brain is turning right now. My brain is going, all right, what do I need to build? What do I need to cut up? I literally have an office here that I built a 12-foot-long desk in, for multiple use, me and Mrs., and it works. But now I do have space I could push back from this desk, at least a good 4 feet.
Well, yeah, and it all depends on how you want to fly, right? I use hardware controllers, but Joe likes to use his VR controllers, where he's not physically grabbing a cyclic. He's just grabbing the controllers, right. And that's great because you don't need to put the controllers down and then kind of feel around for your yoke. I'd much rather have the precision and the haptic feedback from the trim buttons on the yoke, the autopilot disconnect buttons, right? I'd much rather just move my thumb over and click a button,
right,
than release from the throttle with my other hand and then operate the button on the side of the throttle, or I don't know how they actually do it, but to me it just doesn't seem so intuitive. But everyone's got their preference, right?
Right.
Gotcha.
So whatever
go ahead.
Whatever style or whatever works for you will dictate your space. So whatever plane you fly, if you fly a big plane, you're going to need a bigger space. If you fly just a tiny little like 150, you can fly in a cardboard box if you want to. If you want to fly with hardware controllers, that'll dictate your space as well, right? Because you need somewhere to mount it. If you just want to fly with the VR controllers itself, then you can move your chair over to a spot in the room which you've got a lot of space for, and then you don't need to worry about anything. The possibilities are really endless.
How far off is gloves in this VR stuff?
Okay, that's a question. So I actually have a pair of captive gloves. Right now they are very, very, very early in development. They've got a partnership with Eagle Dynamics from DCS World to natively include them in DCS, and to my knowledge, that's going quite well. It's slow, but they're working with Eagle Dynamics directly to make it work beautifully in DCS. I haven't been able to get it working myself because the software is a little bit weird right now. But for X-Plane, those gloves don't work at all. There's other gloves. I think there's like a hand sensor or a hand tracker, which you don't need to wear gloves at all, and you can reach out. And I've heard that some people are having success with those, but I'm not sure exactly how they're using them or how they're operating like buttons, how they're grabbing buttons and turning them. Is in X-Plane, some buttons you can reach out and you can just grab and you can turn. Some you need to like tap with the mouse, constantly click. So I'm not sure how they're working with those buttons, but I don't know. Maybe Joe has some insight into that.
Yeah, it's kind of gesture based. but I don't have a whole lot more insight other than I did see some gloves that have these like hydraulics on them that go back onto your forearm, and it's like each finger has a little hydraulic line that goes back to this thing on the forearm, and then so as you squeeze, it will stop you when your fingertips have touched a 3D mesh. The things will stop your fingers from going forward more, and so that gives you the feeling of you've touched it, right? And so that could be something that's on the horizon. Another thing that I just wanted to mention that was like, well, what is the state of VR in the world? One of the big things as far as VR development is Blender has just released a beta version with full VR support to be able to create 3D models in VR. So you're literally modeling like in VR, which is absolutely sick. And my first thought was, how the crap, like, how do you do that with like, so if I wanted to make an aircraft, what do I need, a ladder? Like, how am I going to get up there and like do the windows? So I'm like, it's got to have some sort of zoom scale, because even like then if I go into like the bolt head, it's like, what am I going to make this thing with, like a little toothpick or whatever? Like, how am I going to model that? Like something so tiny.
Teleport.
Yeah, so it's got to be. But anyway, yeah. So just that in and of itself is really cool.
Wow. Yeah.
You're getting me so excited, because we talked about Ready Player One in a last episode, and how we all kind of wanted a sim that was just like the whole thing, and now this is just another aspect to that whole conversation where it's like, honestly, VR has the full potential to be better than full setups, I'd say. And because when you brought up that whole thing earlier about having a whole cockpit setup, I've always, sorry, I just bumped my microphone. I've always like thought that was really cool myself, but it kind of just dawned on me now too that if we have all this haptic feedback stuff and we have all these things that make the VR world that much more realistic, VR is so much better, because although there is like a hefty investment that you have to make, you have like everything at your fingertips. Then it's not just, you don't just build a Boeing cockpit and then you have to like suffer through flying an Airbus flight or only fly Boeing planes for the rest of your simming career. Now you have all of them at your fingertips, and that's just something that's so, that I still, like, I'm saying it, but I can't quite wrap my head around it, because it's something that sounds so good, it's too good to be true.
Well, it's a hefty investment up front, but it's a lot less of a hefty investment than a Boeing cockpit. Yeah, the other thing is you can spend $35,000 and all that time on this Boeing cockpit, and you can go in the sim and play and crash, and you're going down in this $30,000 cockpit. I guarantee you won't, right before impact, you will not put your arms up over your eyes and your stomach will not lurch. But I promise you, in VR, it happens, man. The first time I went up in VR, it was in a 172. And I'm sitting in there and I'm like, let's just try this thing. It's my first time. I start going up and I looked out, and the 172, it's a high wing aircraft, so you can see the ground underneath you. And I'm going up and I'm only 300, 400 feet off the ground. And I got that feeling, man, like that feeling of elevation. It's just elevation. Crap. It's like if I open this door and I jump out, it's going to be a terminal velocity fall all the way to the ground, and I'm going to die in like a pink mist. And I'm like, it was just like this sense of danger and like this sense of like just there-ness. Like,
yeah.
I swear to God, you guys are going to make me spend some money. I just have a feeling. Oh my God.
It's worth it.
Seriously, I want to 1 hour, 27 minutes later, and I'm shaking my head here going, yeah,
crap.
It's time. I know.
Here we go.
Because Soul said it. I wanted to build a cockpit. Then I was like, all right, if I build a Boeing, then I don't have an Airbus, and I can't build both, and it doesn't move. It's not on a tripod or whatever. But now, as you described with VR, it's like you're feeling your stomach. How's the turbulence in it? If you go through turbulence in the sim, How's that feel?
It's really good. I think that XP Realistic 2 has made it even better. Matheson, do you have that plugin? I haven't tried it, but I've seen it.
I don't. Does it work in VR?
Yeah, it does work in
does.
VR.
Yeah, you know, actually, Roy loves VR like you guys do, and he very specifically told us, "I am not releasing XP Realistic 2
Really?
until it has VR support because I want that." Yeah. He spent a lot of time on the VR because he, like you, really wanted that experience for himself.
I think
he's not a VR guy.
I think I need to get my hands on it because I departed Calgary actually 2 days ago, and if you guys know anything about Alberta storms up in Canada, like the air comes over the mountains and it cools, and you get these giant thunderstorms, right? Like these really powerful thunderstorms. So anyways, I'm departing Calgary and I'm dodging these thunderstorms, and the plane's it's going nuts. So I fly through, I fly, I guess, too close to one of these thunderstorms, and the plane just shakes itself apart to the point where I think X-Plane, I think I encountered an X-Plane bug because I handled everything exactly as I should have, to my knowledge. And my engines, I couldn't climb it. They were at full power, and I leveled off, and it was stalling the plane. So it's almost like my engine just lost power, but I could throttle all the way up. Anyways, but it wasn't icing.
Right.
It wasn't icing at all, which is bizarre. That's what I was trying to prevent. But I was thinking, like, I'm sitting in this plane that's getting completely shook apart by this thunderstorm, and my head is rock solid. Right, it's rock solid in the cockpit. And I'm like, that's a little bit weird. It's a little bit weird. So I had no idea that XP Realistic actually worked in VR and adds that. So I think I need to get my hands on that.
Yeah, it's beautiful. I haven't tried it, but man, I've seen the videos, and he knocked it out of the park. The Hill of Summer, the Hill of Summer helicopter simming community is like over the moon about it. And if the helicopter guys are loving it, then you know it's pretty good, because they're a picky bunch when it comes to weather and turbulence and getting things right as far as flying through the air, the feeling of flying through an actual air mass.
Yeah. Roy did a great job with that plugin, and I don't fly it with VR, but I did a review of the plugin. And I was actually really blown away by it, and all the stuff that he added. It was really, honestly, like next level. I've never seen a visual plugin do things the way that he had done it. He did a fantastic job. So I'd highly recommend it, and you'll have to let me know what it's like, because he spent so much time on it. I'd love to hear like what you guys think about it as well, who are very seasoned in VR stuff. I'm sure that you'll have a lot to say about it, because I remember him talking about having some issues initially with just making it not make you get nauseous whenever it was like moving around a bunch, and having to figure that out was like a whole chore. But when he figured it out, he said it was next level. But I also really quickly want to go back to that whole thing you were talking about, Joe, earlier with the altitude. This is an unconventional idea, but perhaps that might be the solution to people who go on VATSIM and just like fly like complete maniacs. Is you start a startup that just gets them VR headsets, so then they're too afraid to do it.
Well, that's not a bad idea, but that's the sensitivity to that does kind of go away in a realistic way. It's almost like if you started a job and that job made you climb a high ladder, the first week or two, you'd be nervous to climb that ladder. And then after you've done it 45 times, you're just flying up and down the ladder because that's your job. You do it every day. And 45 feet off the ground is like nothing to you because you do it all the time. Well, that's kind of what happens with this. And with real pilots, too. I mean, they lose that sense of danger as they're going up in a normal climb. Now, you still don't lose that sense when things are going wrong. When things are going wrong, man, it always feels like, oh crap, I really screwed this up. I told you I'm crop dusting right now quite a bit. I'm writing a plugin that is a crop dusting plugin. It's everything spraying. Everything that you could spray, putting out fires and different things, you can do all this with this plugin. And so I'm doing all these things where it's like I'm so low and I'm going so fast and I'm spraying and you're if you've ever watched a crop duster, man, they look it's like Psycho, right? But they're in total control. But it's like this is like air shows have nothing on crop dusters, and I'm doing this in VR, and I'm just learning so much again, all over again about piloting and doing things the right way, because they do it in such a methodical way that it's really not a stunt. It's really controlled, and it's really this thing. But in VR, unreal. It's like really, honestly, it's like my favorite VR experience so far is doing this really low level, high speed crop dusting stuff is like unbelievable.
Absolutely. I've
That
I've
sounds
got
pretty awesome.
some really passionate love for Air Force fighters, like fighter jets. Anything fast. I love to fly. So I'm flying around in the Just Flight Hawk. I think that's one of my favorite planes out there right now.
Sweet plane.
Oh, it's amazing. And I'm doing loops. I'm doing rolls. I'm rolling onto target to drop some bombs. I'm shooting down aircraft, and it's absolutely insane. The sense of height is unreal. The sense of speed is unreal. Even like DCS is a better example for this, because you've got a true combat sim with proper flight dynamics. So if you yank your stick all the way over to the left, your plane is gonna just take off. It's gonna roll. You're probably gonna throw up. Right. The only thing that's missing there is the G-force effect. Right. So if you hit some turbulence, I don't know, your head is in the same spot. Right. You don't feel anything on your body. There's no punishment for yanking back on the stick and going straight up. In a real plane, if you don't have like a G suit on, if you don't have training for that, you're gonna pass out, right? You're gonna probably pass out instantly.
Yeah,
right? Yank on the stick, you're done. So that's the biggest setback for me flying fast jets in VR is you don't have that true punishment of G forces that limits your abilities, right?
Yeah, and I mean that makes complete sense, because I remember hearing somewhere that I think most, if not all, modern fighter jets, the only limitation is the person flying them.
Absolutely.
And that the maneuvers, the crazy maneuvers that you see some sim pilots do just for fun, like that would, like the jet could totally handle it and do it so well, but that would kill you.
Yeah, like you get into like a, I don't know, like an extra 300S or an extra 350 or one of those really tiny, race aircraft that are supposed to be super maneuverability. Those things will kill you, right? Like there's no G limiting. You don't wear a G suit. It's pure you versus plane. And if you don't respect it, you're in for a really bad day. And I really wish that VR had the ability to simulate that, in at least in a less deadly fashion, but at least give you some kind of feedback for the respect that you're giving your plane, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
It's coming. It's Ready Player One. They had that platform you can walk and run on, and
I've been
go
tracking
sideways.
My back is saying that I'm good the way it is.
Yeah, this is awesome, guys. This is absolutely awesome. I'm actually excited now more than when we started chatting. This is the future, whether we like it or not. This is gonna.
I think if everyone could try VR at least once, if everyone could have a good first attempt in VR, I think VR headsets would fly off the shelves, and this community would be completely different. Everyone would have a much different appreciation for our hobby.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, hearing you guys talk, I completely agree with that, and I'm excited to try flight sim in VR for the first time. Maybe I'll be able to soon. Who knows? Hopefully, that's something that I can do without having to drop a
Yeah.
bunch of money first in order to get into it. But thank you guys so much for enlightening Norm and I about this whole thing. I'm with Norm in the fact that I am definitely a lot more interested in VR than I was when we first started this conversation. So thank you guys so much for that.
On.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thanks for having us.
Yeah, absolutely. And make sure to, reach out again if you want to come back on and talk to us once FS 2020 happens and tell us all the amazing things that you guys are experiencing when that happens. So thank you guys so much for coming on the show and talking to us. It's been really great.
Thanks, Sol.
Yeah, thanks again. It was a blast talking with you guys.
Absolutely.